Hello, my name is Matt, and I'm here to share what might be the wildest story you've ever read. It's about my wife, Lauren, and how she nearly destroyed my life. She didn't just cheat on me, she tried to have me arrested. But don't worry, I've got a plan, and I'm here to make sure justice gets served. Let me give you a little background. Lauren and I have been married for 8 years. On the surface, our life looked perfect. We had a nice house in the suburbs, 2 cars, and even a golden retriever named Max. Lauren worked as an event planner, and I ran a small tech business from home. She was the life of every party. Charismatic, sharp, and always the center of attention. Everyone loved her. But lately, things have been off. It started small, with her being unusually short-tempered. Lauren would snap at me over little things, like forgetting to load the dishwasher or not responding to her texts fast enough. Then there was the phone. She'd always been glued to it, but now she kept it on silent, face down, and locked with a new password. When I asked her about it, she laughed it off, calling me paranoid and needy. She even accused me of being controlling. I chalked it up to work stress at first. Lauren had been managing some big corporate events, so I figured she just needed space. But the weirdness didn't stop there. She started working late, often, and by late, I mean really late. She'd text me at 10 p.m., saying she had one more meeting, or that she was helping a client with a last-minute emergency. The excuses were plausible, but something about them didn't sit right. Then, last week, a neighbor named Karen came by with a package that had been accidentally delivered to her house. It was addressed to Lauren, which wasn't unusual. She orders a ton of stuff online. But when I handed it to Lauren, her face turned white. She snatched it out of my hand and said, "Oh, it's just supplies for work. Nothing important." It wasn't like Lauren to act nervous, especially not over something as small as a package. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the moment in my head, wondering why she'd reacted the way she did. I know what you're thinking. Matt, you're overthinking this. Believe me, I told myself the same thing. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. What I didn't know was just how deep this rabbit hole would go. This is just the beginning. After Lauren's odd reaction to the package, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. It wasn't just her snatching it out of my hand. It was the way she avoided eye contact and immediately shoved it into her purse like it was some kind of top-secret document. That night, she left for one of her late-night work emergencies again, leaving me alone in the house. I decided to take a closer look at that package. I knew where she kept her purse, and honestly, my gut told me I needed answers. Before you judge me, let me just say this. I wasn't looking for trouble. I was looking for truth. I found the package buried under a bunch of receipts in her purse. The shipping label was generic, with no store name, just a return address in another state. When I opened it, my heart started pounding. Inside was a sleek black leather notebook. At first glance, it looked harmless, like something you'd use for work notes or journaling. But when I flipped through the pages, I realized it wasn't blank. There were notes, lists, and what looked like payment schedules, except none of it made sense. One page stood out, a list of names. Some were highlighted in yellow, and next to them were numbers. Big numbers, like thousands of dollars. I couldn't make heads or tails of it. Was this part of a work project? A side hustle? Something illegal? When Lauren came home that night, I played it cool. I asked her about the package again, this time casually. "Hey, what were those work supplies Karen dropped off? Anything exciting?" She froze for just a second before brushing me off. "Nothing worth mentioning. Just boring client stuff." Her answer felt rehearsed, like she'd been preparing for me to ask. I didn't push her further, but I couldn't let it go. The notebook was now tucked away in my office, hidden behind some old books on a shelf. I figured if it was nothing, I'd confront her later and apologize. But if it was something serious, I wanted to know more before tipping her off. The next day, while Lauren was out, I decided to dig deeper into the names in the notebook. I typed a few into Google, hoping to find something, anything, that would explain what I'd found. That's when I found the first clue that made my stomach drop. One of the names matched a profile on a local business website. It was a guy named Derek, and he owned a high-end jewelry store downtown. The weird part? I never heard Lauren mention him before, but his name was circled in red, with a $5,000 figure next to it. Something told me this was just the beginning. After finding Derek's profile online, I couldn't stop myself from looking up the other names in the notebook. My curiosity had turned into something else, determination, maybe even desperation. I had to know what Lauren was hiding, no matter how messy it got. The next name on the list was Cheryl L., $2,800. A quick search led me to a social media account for a woman named Cheryl Levinson, who ran a boutique clothing store on the other side of town. Her posts were all about luxury, with captions like "New arrivals for the fashion-forward" and "Come find your perfect look." It didn't seem suspicious on the surface, but what connection could Lauren possibly have to a boutique owner? Lauren's event planning work had nothing to do with retail, at least, not that I knew of. I kept going, typing in the next name, Evan M., $3,500. This one was trickier. There were a few results for Evan M. in our city, but one stood out: a freelance photographer with a flashy website showcasing high-end event photography. That hit a little closer to home, considering Lauren's line of work. But then I noticed something odd. His portfolio had several photos of luxury yachts and private parties, the kind of gigs that screamed elite clientele. Lauren's work was nowhere near that level. Why would she be linked to him? Then came Sonia R., $1,200. Sonia was listed as a freelance consultant on LinkedIn, but her profile was vague. No real details about what kind of consulting she did. It was the kind of profile that made you wonder if it was just a front for something else. The last name on the list that stood out to me was Mark T., $7,000. This one was the most alarming yet. Mark Turner, as it turned out, was a criminal defense attorney. His website boasted about winning high-stakes cases and helping clients navigate delicate legal situations. By this point, my mind was racing. Why was Lauren connected to these people? A jeweler, a boutique owner, a photographer, a consultant, and a lawyer. It was a strange mix that didn't add up. The numbers next to their names didn't seem random, either. They had to represent payments, but payments for what? I couldn't help but wonder if this was some kind of elaborate scheme. Was Lauren running a side hustle she hadn't told me about? Was she in trouble? Or worse, was she getting involved in something illegal? I didn't have answers yet, but I knew I was in way over my head. That night, I tried to act normal, but it wasn't easy. Every time Lauren looked at me, I wondered what secret she was keeping. Every time she laughed at something on her phone, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I had to find out more, but I couldn't let her know I was onto her. The more I stared at the notebook, the more obsessed I became with figuring out what the numbers meant. The names were one thing, but those dollar amounts, it was like they were taunting me. Were they debts? Payments? Fees? I had no clue. Lauren's behavior hadn't changed much, which made it easier for me to keep digging without raising suspicion. I waited for her to leave for her usual late-night work events before pulling the notebook out of its hiding spot. I sat at my desk, the names and numbers spread out before me like pieces of a puzzle. I decided to start with what I knew. Derek owned a jewelry store, Cheryl ran a boutique, Evan was a photographer, Sonia was a consultant, and Mark was a lawyer. At first, I thought the dollar amounts might represent services Lauren had paid for, like an event budget. But then something didn't add up. Lauren didn't handle payments in her job. Her clients paid vendors directly. That theory was out, so I tried something else. I looked up Derek's jewelry store again and found a news article from about 6 months ago. It mentioned that he had hosted a private showcase featuring rare diamond pieces, including a $5,000 necklace that had been sold to an anonymous buyer. My heart skipped a beat when I saw the price. Was it a coincidence that the $5,000 next to Derek's name matched the cost of that necklace? Maybe. But then I remembered the numbers next to Cheryl and Evan. If these were payments, I needed to know what Lauren was getting in return. I decided to dig deeper into Cheryl's boutique. After scrolling through her social media, I found a photo of a custom dress she had recently designed, priced at $2,800. It was tagged as sold. Again, the amount matched perfectly with the number in the notebook. I tried Evan next. His website had a section for private event packages, and one of them, his premium yacht photo shoot package, was priced at $3,500. The exact figure next to his name. By this point, my stomach was in knots. These weren't random payments. Lauren had clearly been involved with these people, and the amounts lined up too perfectly to be a coincidence. Then I hit the jackpot. I searched Mark Turner's name and found an article from last year about a high-profile case he had handled. He was known for working with clients who needed legal protection in sensitive matters. The $7,000 next to his name made sense now. Mark wasn't just any lawyer. He was the kind of lawyer you called when you were in serious trouble. That's when the realization hit me. These weren't just vendors or clients. These were people Lauren had been paying off for something. But what? I decided to search Sonia or next the vague consultant. Her LinkedIn profile didn't give much away, but a few more searches revealed she worked as a crisis PR consultant, someone people hired to clean up scandals or manage personal reputation issues. It all clicked. Lauren wasn't just paying for services. She was orchestrating something behind the scenes, something expensive and secretive. And judging by the kinds of people she was dealing with, a jeweler, a PR consultant, a lawyer, this wasn't innocent. I couldn't breathe. What was she hiding? Why was she paying these people so much money? At this point, I knew I needed to find out more before confronting her. There was something big happening, and I had to be ready for whatever was coming. Part 5. The Breakthrough. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was on the verge of uncovering something massive. Lauren's connections to the people in the notebook were too specific, too deliberate. The amounts of money, the secrecy, none of it felt random. I knew I had to take my search to the next level. Google had helped me connect the dots so far, but it wasn't enough. I needed more direct answers. That's when I remembered something. Lauren's email. She had a habit of using the same password for everything. It wasn't exactly a secure choice. Her go-to was a combination of our anniversary and Max's name. But it was an advantage for me now. I waited until she left the house for her yoga class, another one of her sketchy excuses, then sat down at my computer and logged into her email. The inbox was overwhelming at first. Hundreds of messages from work, online shopping confirmations, and spam. But then I spotted a folder titled Miscellaneous. It wasn't a work folder. Lauren's work emails were all neatly sorted into client-specific labels. This one stood out like a sore thumb. I clicked it, and my heart sank. The first email I opened was from Derek, the jeweler. Subject: Payment received. Hi, Lauren. The payment cleared this morning. The piece will be ready for pickup on Thursday. Let me know if you want it delivered instead. The second was from Evan, the photographer. Subject: Private session. Hey, Lauren. Confirming the photo shoot for Friday evening. Discretion guaranteed, as always. Discretion? Guaranteed? My hands were shaking as I clicked on the next message. This one was from Sonia, the PR consultant. Subject: Follow up, Lauren. I've drafted the talking points for the situation. Let me know if you want me to adjust the language. Also, keep in mind that hiring Mark is the right call if things escalate. Let me know how you want to proceed. Mark, the lawyer. I didn't even realize I was holding my breath until I read that sentence. If things escalate. Escalate how? What situation were they planning for? Just as I was about to log off, I noticed an attachment in one of Sonia's emails titled plannersfordetails.pdf. My heart was pounding as I downloaded it, not sure if I was ready to see what was inside. The document was a list of steps, an actual plan, to manage what Sonia referred to as a sensitive personal matter. It included instructions for public statements, social media strategies, and legal options. But what hit me hardest was the section labeled Contingency Plan. Under it was a single bullet point. If necessary, coordinate with Mark to establish grounds for filing charges against Matthew. I froze. Matthew. That's me. I didn't know what Lauren was planning, but it was clear that it wasn't good. And the worst part? I had no idea why. What had I done to deserve this? I wasn't perfect, sure. I worked long hours and wasn't always the most attentive husband. But this wasn't just lying or cheating. This was something else entirely. My thoughts raced. What kind of charges? Was she accusing me of something illegal? Was she trying to paint me as some kind of monster? I felt like I couldn't breathe. My chest was tight, and my heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. I wanted to storm out, to call her, and demand answers. But I knew that wouldn't help. Lauren was smart, manipulative even. If I tipped her off, she'd find a way to spin this. The more I thought about it, the more I felt trapped. This was my wife, the woman I'd trusted, the woman I'd built a life with. How had we gotten here? How had I gotten here? That night was one of the longest of my life. Lauren came home around 10 p.m., her usual excuse of work ran late, rolling off her tongue like it was nothing. I watched her move around the house, calm, confident, completely unaware that I knew about the file. My stomach churned. Every word she said felt rehearsed, every movement calculated. Was this the woman I married? Or had she always been this way, and I just never saw it? I barely spoke to her, afraid that if I opened my mouth, everything I was feeling would spill out. My anger, my confusion, my fear. And oh, the fear was suffocating. What if her plan was already in motion? What if she was laying the groundwork for whatever charges she was planning to file? Would the police show up at my door one day, blindsiding me with something I didn't see coming? The uncertainty was unbearable. I replayed every interaction we'd had over the past few months, searching for answers. Was it something I said? Did I unknowingly hurt her? Or was this all about money? The thought that Lauren might be setting me up for financial gain sent chills down my spine. Could she be trying to frame me for embezzlement? Fraud? I ran my own small tech business. What if she found a way to use that against me? The what-ifs swirled in my head, each one worse than the last. I felt like I was unraveling, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. At some point in the night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let Lauren destroy me, not without a fight. But to fight back, I needed more information. I needed to understand her plan before she put it into action. So, I started preparing. I backed up everything I'd found so far, the notebook, the emails, the file. I saved copies on an external drive and stashed it somewhere she'd never think to look. I also reached out to a lawyer the next morning, someone I trusted, and set up a meeting. I didn't know exactly what Lauren was planning, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to sit back and let her blindside me. The next few days were some of the most nerve-wracking of my life. Every time Lauren walked into the room, I felt like I was walking on a tightrope, one wrong step away from falling into disaster. She moved around the house like nothing was wrong, humming while she cooked or scrolling on her phone. Meanwhile, I was trying not to let my panic show. I felt like I was living with a stranger. Every smile she gave me felt fake, every touch calculated. I found myself wondering how long she'd been planning this, how long she'd been weaving this web around me, without me even noticing. The day of my meeting with the lawyer, Tom, I felt like I was going to throw up. Tom had been a friend of my family for years, someone I knew I could trust. I told him everything, the notebook, the emails, the weird payments, and most importantly, the file that mentioned me by name. Tom listened quietly, jotting down notes as I spoke. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, his expression grim. "This isn't just about money," he said. "She's building a narrative. If that file is accurate, she's trying to create a legal case against you. The question is, for what?" I shook my head. "I don't know. I haven't done anything illegal." "It doesn't have to be true," Tom said. "It just has to look bad enough to make you look guilty. But don't panic. We'll make sure you're protected." He gave me a list of steps to take. Document everything. Every interaction with Lauren. Every strange behavior. Every financial move. Secure my accounts. He suggested freezing any joint credit cards and keeping an eye on transactions. Stay calm. The more she believes you're in the dark, the more careless she might get, Tom said. Hearing that gave me a shred of hope. If Lauren was trying to manipulate me, I could turn the tables by letting her think I was oblivious. When I got home, Lauren was sitting on the couch, sipping a glass of wine and scrolling through her phone. She barely glanced at me as I walked in, muttering a quick, "Hey, how was your day?" "Fine," I said, keeping my voice neutral. Inside, I felt like a live wire, ready to snap. But I knew I had to keep up the act. I couldn't let her see that I was on to her. That night, as she slept soundly next to me, I stayed up, staring at the ceiling. My mind raced with questions I couldn't answer. What was her endgame? Why was she trying to destroy me? By now, I knew that playing defense wasn't enough. If I wanted to survive this, I had to get ahead of Lauren's plan. I needed to find out what she was doing with the people in the notebook: Derek, Cheryl, Evan, Sonia, and Mark. The next morning, I called in a favor from my friend Eric, a tech-savvy guy who owed me one. Eric wasn't just good with computers. He was a genius. I asked him if he could help me dig into Lauren's online activity. "She's my wife," I told him. "I'm not asking you to do anything illegal. Just find out if there's something I'm missing." Eric agreed, but he warned me it might take time. "If there's something there, I'll find it, he promised. While Eric worked on that, I started digging through our finances. Lauren had always been the one to manage our joint accounts, but I knew my way around enough to spot anything unusual. Sure enough, there were charges that didn't make sense, payments to vendors I didn't recognize, and withdrawals that didn't match up with anything I knew about. By the end of the week, I felt like I was piecing together a puzzle, but the picture still wasn't clear. Lauren was hiding something big, and I was getting closer to finding out what it took Eric a couple of days to get back to me. Those days felt like an eternity. Every moment I spent in the same house as Lauren was like sitting on a ticking time bomb. She was acting normal, too normal almost, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she knew something was off. Finally, Eric called me. "Matt," he said, his voice cautious, "I've found something. You're not going to like it." I gripped the phone tightly. "Just tell me." "Okay," he began. I started by looking at her email history. Most of it was clean, but I found something weird in her deleted files. She's been sending encrypted messages to someone. "Encrypted?" I asked, my stomach turning. "Yeah, like she's using some kind of private email service to hide her conversations. I can't read the messages, but I traced the account she's sending them to." He paused for a moment. "It belongs to Mark Turner, the lawyer." I felt like the floor dropped out from under me. "The guy in the notebook? The one she might hire for whatever this is?" "That's the one," Eric confirmed. "But that's not all." I dug deeper into her browser history, specifically stuff she's accessed on her work laptop. "There's a folder full of files with your name on them." "What kind of files?" "Legal documents. Contracts. But there's one that stands out. It's a draft of a restraining order." My breath caught in my throat. "A restraining order? For what?" "I couldn't see the details," Eric admitted. "But whatever it is, she's building a case against you. I don't know if it's to make you look violent, unstable, or something else entirely, but she's serious." The call left me reeling. A restraining order? Lauren was planning to paint me as a threat. But why? Was it to kick me out of the house? To gain leverage in a divorce? Or was this part of something even darker? I didn't know the answers, but I couldn't sit idle anymore. The notebook, the emails, the financial discrepancies, they were all pieces of a larger scheme, and Lauren was pulling the strings. I spent the next few hours and days trying to keep myself from spiraling. Every scenario I imagined ended with me being blindsided, arrested, sued, or left with nothing. But then I remembered what Tom, my lawyer, had said. The more she thinks you're in the dark, the more careless she'll get. I decided to stay quiet, even as the fear gnawed at me. That evening, Lauren came home like nothing had happened. She kissed me on the cheek, asked about my day, and even suggested we watch a movie together. I couldn't believe how normal she seemed, how effortlessly she hid whatever she was planning. As we sat on the couch, her head resting on my shoulder, I couldn't help but wonder how long she'd been doing this. Had she ever loved me, or had it all been an act? Part of me wanted to confront her right then and there, to demand answers. But I knew that would play right into her hands. If she was building a case to make me look like the bad guy, I couldn't give her any ammunition. Instead, I sat there, pretending everything was fine, while my mind raced with plans of my own. By this point, the fear and uncertainty had turned into determination. I didn't know the full extent of Lauren's plan, but I knew one thing. If she wanted to destroy me, I wasn't going to make it easy for her. The first step was to gather as much evidence as possible. I needed to protect myself, not just legally, but emotionally too. Every piece of information I uncovered reminded me that I wasn't crazy, that there really was a storm brewing, and I wasn't imagining it. I started with our financial accounts. Lauren had always managed most of the bills, but I still had access to our joint accounts. When I dug into the statements, I found several transactions that didn't add up. For one, there were multiple withdrawals to the same anonymous payment processor. The amounts were suspiciously close to the numbers in her notebook: $5,000, $2,800, $3,500. These payments lined up with the names of Derek, Cheryl, and Evan, and they'd been happening over the past 6 months. What was she paying them for? Jewelry? Photo shoots? Something else entirely? There were also smaller transactions. Hundreds of dollars spent at restaurants, bars, and even hotel lounges. Places I'd never been with her. The dates matched times when she claimed to be working late. The evidence was damning, but it wasn't enough. I needed more than just financial breadcrumbs. Eric, my tech-savvy friend, came through again. He'd managed to bypass some of Lauren's encrypted messages, but the content was vague. Most of the emails with Mark Turner, the lawyer, were about preparations and ensuring confidentiality. There was also one message that stood out. The situation with Matthew is escalating. We may need to move to phase 2 soon. What the hell was phase 2? Another email to Sonia, the PR consultant, referenced a narrative she was creating. It sounded like Lauren was trying to spin some kind of story about me, but I still didn't know the details. Eric also flagged a series of deleted texts from Lauren's phone. They were conversations with someone named C. The messages were short and cryptic with phrases like, "It's almost ready, and don't forget the timing is crucial." See? Was it Cheryl, the boutique owner? Or someone else entirely? As I pieced everything together, I stumbled upon something I hadn't noticed before. On one of Lauren's deleted emails, there was an attachment, a scanned document with my name on it. When I opened it, my blood ran cold. It was a signed statement accusing me of physical and emotional abuse. The details were fabricated, but they were specific enough to sound believable. It painted me as controlling, volatile, and unfit to stay in the house or have access to our accounts. My stomach churned as I read it. Lauren was planning to use this to file a restraining order against me. If she succeeded, I'd be kicked out of my own home, cut off from my own money, and possibly even arrested. But why? Why go to these lengths? I couldn't stop thinking about what Tom, my lawyer, had said. It doesn't have to be true. It just has to look bad enough to make you look guilty. She wasn't just trying to leave me. She was trying to obliterate me. I knew I couldn't sit on this information for long. Lauren was getting bolder, and I couldn't risk her putting her plan into action before I was ready. I met with Tom the next day, laying everything out, the emails, the financial records, the fabricated abuse statement. He looked grim but focused. "You've got enough to start building your case," he said, "but you need to keep playing it cool. If she catches on, she might move faster." It was a nerve-wracking strategy, but I agreed. I'd let Lauren think she was still in control while quietly building a defense that would blow her plans apart. After meeting with Tom, I felt a glimmer of hope for the first time in weeks. Lauren had been playing her game in the shadows, but now I had a plan of my own. I wasn't just going to protect myself. I was going to expose her lies and make sure she didn't get away with whatever she was plotting. The first step was subtle. I had to let Lauren think she was still in control. As much as it killed me to smile through dinner or nod along to her casual conversations, I knew I couldn't tip her off. She needed to believe I was completely oblivious. Tom suggested a brilliant move. Sometimes, the best way to expose someone is to give them a reason to slip up, he said. So, I started leaving small hints that I was stressed or distracted. Nothing obvious, just enough to make Lauren curious. I'd sigh heavily when I thought she wasn't looking or stare at my phone like I was waiting for a call. Once, I even accidentally mentioned that I was meeting an old friend from college for lunch, a made-up friend who didn't exist. Lauren didn't say anything at first, but I noticed the way her eyes lingered on me a little longer, the way her smile seemed forced. She was starting to wonder if I knew something. It didn't take long for Lauren to slip. One night, as we were sitting in the living room, she casually mentioned, "You've been quiet lately. Everything okay?" I forced a smile. "Yeah, just work stuff. You know how it is." She nodded, but I could see the wheels turning in her head. A few days later, she slipped up again. I caught her checking my phone while I was in the shower. Normally, I'd leave it on the counter, but ever since I'd started backing up evidence and communicating with Tom, I'd made sure to password lock everything. When I walked into the room, she jumped back like a kid caught stealing cookies from the jar. "What are you doing?" I asked, keeping my tone light. "Nothing," she said quickly, laughing it off. "Your phone buzzed, and I thought it might be important." Nice try, I thought, but I let it slide. The real turning point came when I caught her in an outright lie. One evening, Lauren claimed she was meeting a client for drinks. Normally, I'd let it go, but this time I decided to check. I drove to the bar she'd mentioned, parking across the street where I had a clear view of the entrance. An hour passed, then two. She never showed up. When she came home later that night, I casually asked, "How was the meeting?" She hesitated just for a second before saying, "Oh, it went fine. They want me to plan a summer gala." I nodded. biting back the urge to call her out. That hesitation was all I needed to confirm what I already knew. She was lying. That night, I couldn't sleep. As much as I hated keeping quiet, I knew I had to wait for the right moment to strike. Tom had been clear. We needed undeniable proof, not just suspicions. So, I doubled down on documenting everything. Every strange behavior, every late-night disappearance, every transaction I couldn't explain, it all went into a file. I also started recording our conversations, just in case I needed them later. By now, it was clear that Lauren was getting nervous. She started acting nicer, offering to cook dinner, asking how my day was, even suggesting we go out for a date night. But I wasn't fooled. Lauren wasn't being kind out of guilt. She was trying to manipulate me, to lull me into a false sense of security. But I wasn't falling for it. The real breakthrough came when Eric called me with another update. "Matt, you're not going to believe this," he said. "I found another encrypted file on her laptop. It's a contract with Mark Turner." "What kind of contract?" I asked, my heart racing. "It's labeled as a retainer agreement," Eric explained. "She's officially hired him to represent her in a legal case. And here's the kicker. Part of the contract mentions divorce proceedings." Divorce. She was planning to divorce me. But that wasn't all. Eric had also found a series of notes Lauren had written about me. They painted me as abusive, controlling, and emotionally unstable. Exactly the kind of narrative Sonia, the PR consultant, had been helping her craft. It was all coming together now. Lauren wasn't just planning to leave me. She was trying to destroy my reputation and take everything I owned in the process. The moment Eric confirmed that Lauren had hired Mark Turner for divorce proceedings, it felt like a punch to the gut. Divorce wasn't the shocking part. I'd been expecting that. It was the strategy she was building to completely dismantle my life. She wasn't just trying to leave me. She was out to destroy me. But if Lauren thought she had the upper hand, she was wrong. Thanks to Eric's tech skills and Tom's legal advice, I had a solid plan to protect myself and even turn the tables on her. Tom and I spent hours putting together a defense. The fake abuse narrative was the centerpiece of her plan, and I knew that debunking it would be key. Here's what we prepared. Documentation of our relationship. I went through years of texts, emails, and photos to show the truth about our marriage. There wasn't a single instance that supported her claims of abuse. Financial records. I highlighted every suspicious payment and withdrawal Lauren had made. The numbers from the notebook and the accounts she used were undeniable evidence of her secret dealings. Surveillance evidence. Eric helped me recover deleted messages and emails, including her fabricated abuse statement and the files connecting her to Sonia, the PR consultant. Tom was confident. "Lauren's story won't hold up against this much evidence," he said. "But you need to be patient. Let her make the first move." It didn't take long for Lauren to strike. One evening, she came home earlier than usual, looking unusually tense. She sat down across from me at the dining table, fidgeting with her phone. "We need to talk," she said. Here it was, the big moment. "What's on your mind?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. She hesitated, then launched into a speech about how she felt unsafe in our marriage. She accused me of being controlling, of monitoring her every move, and even of making her feel like she couldn't breathe. It was surreal, hearing her weave these lies with such conviction. "I think it's best if we take some space," she said, her voice trembling just enough to sound genuine. "I've already spoken to a lawyer." I stared at her, letting the weight of her words hang in the air. Inside, I was furious, but outwardly, I stayed calm. "Is that what you really want?" I asked. She nodded, her expression carefully crafted to look hurt. "Okay," I said simply. Her eyes widened slightly, like she'd expected a fight. Instead, I stood up, cleared the dishes, and left the room. Lauren's reaction told me everything I needed to know. She was expecting me to blow up, to give her the evidence she needed to support her abuse narrative. But I wasn't going to play into her hands. The next morning, I quietly contacted Tom and finalized the steps to protect myself. He filed a motion to freeze our joint accounts, ensuring Lauren couldn't drain them without my consent. We also filed a notice of intent to contest any abuse claims she might make. Meanwhile, Eric had one more trick up his sleeve. Using the recovered messages and financial records, He created a digital timeline of Lauren's activities over the past 6 months. The timeline painted a clear picture. Lauren's secret payments to people like Sonia, Derek, and Mark. Her fabricated abuse story. Her coordinated efforts to sabotage me legally and financially. It was airtight. Then came the twist I didn't see coming. 2 days later, Eric called me, his voice urgent. "Matt, I found something else. It's about Mark Turner." "What about him?" "He's not just her lawyer. He's involved with her. Personally." My jaw dropped. "Are you saying?" "They're having an affair," Eric said. "There are texts, emails, even photos. She's been seeing him behind your back while plotting all of this." It all clicked. The late nights, the secrecy, the calculated strategy. It wasn't just Lauren. Mark Turner had been helping her every step of the way, both as her lawyer and her lover. This changed everything. Finding out about Lauren's affair with Mark Turner was like watching the final piece of the puzzle click into place. Her entire scheme, the fabricated abuse claims, the secret payments, the calculated sabotage, wasn't just about control or money. It was about protecting her relationship with him. This revelation wasn't just shocking. It was a gift. Now I had leverage, and I planned to use it to dismantle her plan piece by piece. The first thing I did was share everything with Tom. When I told him about the affair, he sat back in his chair, a slow grin spreading across his face. "Well, this changes things," he said. "If she's involved with her lawyer, that's a massive conflict of interest. We can use this to discredit her entirely." We started preparing immediately. Tom drafted a motion to expose Mark's dual role as Lauren's lawyer and her lover. This wasn't just unethical. It was potentially illegal, depending on how much Mark had influenced the false abuse narrative. At the same time, Eric continued digging. He found more incriminating evidence. Text messages between Lauren and Mark discussing how to spin the abuse allegations, emails outlining how they divide my assets, and even a few receipts from luxury hotel stays. With all the pieces in place, I decided it was time to confront Lauren, not to accuse her, but to see how she'd react when I flipped the script. That evening, I waited until we were both sitting in the living room. She was scrolling on her phone, looking calm and collected, as if she didn't have a care in the world. "Lauren," I said, keeping my voice steady, "can we talk?" She glanced up, feigning concern. "Of course. What's on your mind?" I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about everything that's been happening lately." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "What do you mean?" "I know things haven't been perfect," I continued, "but I want to work through this. I want to figure out what's really going on." Her expression shifted, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. She wasn't expecting this. "You've seemed distant lately," I added, watching her closely. "I just want to make sure we're being honest with each other." For a moment, she didn't say anything. Then she forced a smile. "I appreciate that, Matt. Really, I do. But I think space is still the best option for us right now." I nodded, pretending to accept her response. But inside, I was already planning my next move. The next day, Tom filed the motion exposing the affair. It was a bold move, but it paid off. Within hours, Lauren received a notification from her lawyer, Mark Turner, of course, and I could tell something was wrong. She paced around the house, her phone glued to her ear, her voice low and frantic. I caught snippets of the conversation. "How did they find out? This wasn't supposed to happen yet. We need to fix this, Mark." By the time she hung up, her face was pale. She avoided me for the rest of the day, and I couldn't help but smile. The motion had an immediate effect. Mark Turner was forced to recuse himself as Lauren's lawyer, leaving her scrambling to find new representation. Without him guiding her, her entire case started to fall apart. Meanwhile, Tom and I continued building our defense. We submitted the texts, emails, and financial records as evidence, painting a clear picture of Lauren's deceit. The fabricated abuse claims were thoroughly discredited, and the judge wasn't pleased when he saw how far Lauren had gone to manipulate the system. Lauren tried to maintain her composure, but the pressure was too much. A week after Mark's recusal, she finally broke. One night, she stormed into the living room, her face twisted with anger. "You think you've won, don't you?" she spat. "You think you're so clever, ruining everything I've built." I stayed calm. "You ruined it yourself, Lauren. You lied, you schemed, and you got caught. That's not my fault. Her hands trembled as she pointed a finger at me. You don't understand. You never understood. Then explain it to me, I said, my voice steady. What was the plan, Lauren? To frame me? To take everything? Why? Her silence spoke volumes. She turned on her heel and left the room without another word. In the days that followed, Lauren's world crumbled. Without Mark's guidance, her legal strategy was a mess, and she eventually agreed to a settlement that left me with the house, my business, and the majority of our shared assets. She moved out shortly after, leaving behind nothing but a few boxes and the bitter taste of betrayal. When Lauren moved out, it was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. For the first time in months, I could breathe without the constant tension of wondering what she'd do next. The house, once a battlefield, now felt like a sanctuary. But as much as I was relieved to be free of her schemes, the silence that followed was deafening. There was no yelling, no lies, no manipulations, just me and my thoughts. And those thoughts weren't always kind. The truth was, Lauren hadn't just tried to take my money or ruin my reputation. She'd shaken my very sense of trust. I couldn't stop wondering how I'd missed the signs, how I'd let myself believe in someone who was capable of such calculated cruelty. I replayed moments from our marriage in my head, looking for clues I'd ignored. Had she always been this manipulative, or had something changed along the way? The questions gnawed at me, but I knew there were no easy answers. The hardest part was realizing that the woman I thought I'd married never really existed. The Lauren I loved was just a mask she wore, and that mask had shattered long before I ever noticed. With the legal battle behind me, I turned my focus to rebuilding my life. I threw myself into work, taking on new projects and reconnecting with clients I'd neglected during the chaos. My business, which I'd feared might suffer during the ordeal, ended up thriving. I also started making changes around the house. I sold the furniture Lauren had picked out, repainted the walls, and even adopted a cat from the local shelter. Something I'd always wanted to do, but never did because Lauren hated cats. Small as these changes were, they felt symbolic. I was reclaiming my space, my identity, and my future. One of the biggest lessons I learned was the importance of leaning on others. For months, I tried to shoulder everything alone, afraid to let anyone see how broken I felt. But as I opened up to friends and family, I realized just how much support I had. My best friend, Eric, was a constant source of humor and perspective. He joked that my life had turned into a Lifetime movie, but he also reminded me that I wasn't defined by what Lauren had done to me. Even my lawyer, Tom, became more than just legal counsel. He became a friend, someone who genuinely cared about my well-being beyond the courtroom. The most unexpected part of the journey was the freedom that came with letting go. For so long, I'd been consumed by fear, anger, and betrayal. But as I moved forward, those emotions started to fade. I didn't forgive Lauren. I don't think I ever will. But I stopped letting her control my life, even from a distance. She was gone, and her plans had failed. That was enough. As I write this, I'm sitting in my newly redecorated living room, sipping coffee with my cat purring beside me. Life isn't perfect, but it's mine again. I don't know what the future holds, but I know this. I'll never let anyone take my peace away again. If you're reading this and you've been through something similar, know that it gets better. You're stronger than you think, and no betrayal can take away your ability to rebuild. This is the end of my story, or maybe it's just the beginning. It's been 6 months since Lauren walked out of my life for good, and I can finally say that I'm at peace. The past few months haven't been easy. Healing never is. But they've taught me more about myself than I ever thought possible, that if there's one thing I've taken away from this experience, it's the importance of trusting your instincts. Looking back, the red flags were there, but I let love, or what I thought was love, blind me to the truth. Never again. I've also learned the power of resilience. When Lauren tried to destroy me, I could have crumbled. I could have let her lies define me. But instead, I fought back, not just for my reputation or my assets, but for my sense of self. And maybe the most surprising lesson? Not all change is bad. Losing Lauren was devastating at first, but it also made room for things I never thought I'd have. True peace, new passions, and even a sense of adventure. These days, I've been focusing on things that make me happy. I've started hiking again, something I used to love but hadn't done in years. I've also taken up photography, inspired by the freedom of capturing the world as I see it, without filters or pretenses. Work is thriving, my house finally feels like home, and I've even started dating again. Nothing serious, just coffee here and there, but it feels good to open myself up to the possibility of something real. To anyone reading this who's going through something similar, here's what I want you to know. You're not alone. Betrayal can make you feel isolated, but there's always someone who's been where you are. Don't be afraid to reach out for help. Protect yourself. Emotionally, legally, financially, whatever it takes. You deserve to come out of this with your dignity intact. Focus on what you can control. You can't change what someone else does, but you can choose how you respond. Most importantly, remember that this isn't the end of your story. It might feel like everything is falling apart, but sometimes the hardest endings lead to the best beginnings. I don't think I'll ever fully understand why Lauren did what she did, but I've stopped letting her actions take up space in my mind. She's part of my past now, and my focus is on the future. Here's to rebuilding, rediscovering, and reclaiming life one step at a time. Thanks for reading, and I hope my story helps someone out there who needs it. You're stronger than you think. Don't ever forget that. If you like the story, please subscribe to the channel and like the video. Have a nice day. See you soon.